Your personality will be strongest in a certain type of path. And you might actually just need a different path. And ultimately, you're the only one who's going to be able to know that for sure, which is why having an understanding of yourself is so important. You can know where you need to go. The goal is a deep, rich, integrated state of being from which you can live a life that you really genuinely want. The sense of joy and love and peace, like this deep sense of sort of interconnection with life and with our world. You can have it all, but it will take work to get there. To become the most non-dual that you can become requires entry. You have to enter into life, enter into your life, who you are on so many different levels, and bring everything that you've learned with you, so that it's not just knowledge. Not that there's anything wrong with knowledge, but it becomes more. It becomes the way that you live your life. It becomes what your life is. Your life just is it. Like these days for me, I don't have any lofty spiritual goals. I am human, and my humanity is my realization. Like that's where I am, and what I'm realizing about humanity is just becoming more and more profound every day. I feel like my body and my humanity is just like a cache of treasures. Like, the more awareness that I bring into my humanity, the more jewels I find. And some of them are so difficult to describe, but it's like unlocking like just knowledge, like treasure chests of knowledge held within the body that unravel the mysteries of life and the universe. Like the universe starts to make more sense. My connectedness with the universe and with all life becomes more real and tangible. Like I feel it, literally, like as flows of life force through my body. It's not some abstract thing, it's completely alive, and it's transforming my perception of myself and my place within our living cosmos in a way where I know that I belong, that I am a part of this vast entity that is my own self. It's making tangible all the things that are said about in non-duality, so that you know them. And the gems of realization that are held within the body, sometimes they are guarded by your own darkness. So in the mythological sense, there's a battle that is waged that looks like going through your own personal turmoil and then bringing consciousness to it. And that means that just things will just come up. Like I'm not like, okay, today I am going to work through my darkness of this part and that's that done. It's like, no, it comes up because it got triggered by somebody and what they said, and then I know that I'm going into it, and then it's like, okay, like what gifts, like what will this become? Like who will I be after I truly meet this part of myself?
You're listening to the Non-Duality podcast. This is Nick Hyam from thewholenessofexperience.com. Here's part 2 of Paul Dobson's conversation with Jack Morrigan.
We talk about integrating the dark, and how does one integrate the dark? What's worked for you in your experience?
I had some very difficult childhood experiences, which then led into my drug and alcohol dependency that I was talking about. So I had a Kundalini awakening, which was just like a bolt of lightning, just lighting up my body. And it's like someone had just took the dimmer switch and just suddenly turned it up. And I'm looking around my room and I realize that it is an absolute mess. And I've been banging into things all the time. It's like, oh, this is why I'm in constant pain. For 2.5 years after that experience, I was out of work, just having nightmares all the time. For me, it was very, very intense because I went from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye. And I just had to figure out how to deal with it. And I got brought to my knees. Life brought me to my knees until I was humble enough to actually seek out help. I had to be dragged kicking and screaming into my own shadows and my own mess to finally meet that stuff. So I sought out help first from my spiritual teacher. She had training in not only spiritual practices, but also in counseling. So she was supporting me through both of these things at the same time, which was really, really helpful. Then I did counseling training, which includes a lot of going through counseling yourself. So that I learned a lot through that. That's how I went into things. And I'm now in a place where I can offer support to other people. Like, my view of things and my approach is very relational. And it's quite like how I am. Very relational. So it's the goal is a deep, rich, integrated state of being from which you can live a life that you really genuinely want. The sense of joy and love and peace, like this deep sense of sort of interconnection with life and with our world. You can have it all, but it will take work to get there. You know, it's just like tending a garden. No, I see that shadowy side of me. I'll be honest about it. I'll talk about it, and I'll meet it in myself. I'll go...
It's a radical self-honesty, isn't it?
Yeah. And I find that the more I do that, the safer people feel with me. Because they can see that normally what we do is we push that stuff down. And we're trying to hide it, but it's still there. And it creates a kind of energetic tension that other people can feel, even if they're not really conscious of it. And it can lead people to feel less safe with us, which can harm our relationships. Whereas if we're willing to find that stuff in ourselves, become friendly enough with it and safe enough with it that we can start expressing it to people who are ready to hear it, not just anyone. But from that, you can make some really incredible relationships where both of you are meeting yourselves and expressing yourselves more fully. And it just feels very liberating. And I feel like that's the connection that we have.
That's a really important part of it, though. Find a friend that you can trust. And this isn't spoken about usually in non-duality, you know? It's the lone wolf thing, like you said before. Find a friend that you can trust, like creating a portal between the two of you. You're opening kind of a doorway between the two where they can then share, and then there's this mutual trust. And I think it's a really helpful part of this. You don't have to just integrate everything by yourself. Like, you don't just have to have these. That's a big part of it, of course, and maybe even the main part of it. But, I can share this stuff and no one's I'm not being judged here, so it's okay. It's okay that I feel this because this is part of being human.
Yes.
Oh, it's okay. I don't need to be ashamed of this part of myself. Like, it doesn't mean that's all I am. I can share it and this person is open to hearing it and the relationship's still stable. Yeah.
Let's say your goal is only the non-dual enlightened experience. Even if you're just taking it from that perspective. What you're doing by sharing this stuff is you are purifying your vessel. Right? So your human body and mind is a vessel for spiritual realization. And if you are purifying it by sharing stuck shame that then becomes released and transmuted into consciousness, you now have more consciousness to dedicate to your spiritual practice. So even if you're just looking at it from that very kind of rigid perspective of like, okay, I want to get from A to B, how do I get there? Why is this helpful for me? That's one of the reasons.
You know, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and I can also hear the voices of the strict non-dualists coming from their perspective and going, well, everything is already God, so you don't need to purify anything. And I think that is my thing on that is that is a perspective that is true, but it's also true as a realization going through these channels, of doing this integration and shadow work. It's like, I'm looking back from the end point, you could say, after going through all of this stuff, and you're looking back and it's become clear to you that was always the case. Everything was always already God. From start to finish, there was no beginning and end. It's God now, God at the beginning, God in the middle, God in the end. God in the darkness, God in the light, God in the shadows, God in the shame, all of it. That could be a hindsight view of, that's kind of a joke. I've seen it was always the case. Yeah, if you're not actually, if that's not 100% clear to you in your experience, if that's not clear to you and that's only a philosophy, that is useless. It's useless. It's like a nice philosophy and it's kind of maybe soothing in some ways, but it's also useless. And you sharing your dark shit with friends may just be how that realization in process looks, like that realizing that everything was already God. That's maybe how it looks. It might not be immediately obvious to you at that time when you're sharing, like, that all is God, because you do feel shame about it and you're sharing. But it's really difficult one to describe, but that's how God unfolding to itself looks like as humans beings. God unfolding to itself, realizing itself as God, the great already is the case situation. That's how it looks as the humans slowly kind of start to realize themselves as God. It looks like all this dark work. It looks like sharing with friends. It looks like these deep conversations and openness and exchanges of love and trust. And it looks like difficult relationships and all of the integration stuff. It might look, that's the way it looks at the ground level. But then you have a more expanded picture and you go, it already is already the case. It's so don't get stuck in the philosophy of that would be my advice. Don't get stuck in the philosophy of all is that. If you don't really feel it as see it as true.
Yeah, like it needs,
and do all this stuff.
It needs to be made tangible, like for that realization to permeate every aspect of you. So you have to go into it. It's like if you're outside a temple and you were just looking at it and you were describing it to someone and going, look, I know everything about this temple. It's got this. And then the person's like, oh, great. Have you ever been inside? Like, you have to go in and you have to make you don't have to, obviously this is your choice. But if you, in my opinion, to become the most non-dual that you can become requires entry. You have to enter into life, enter into your life, who you are on so many different levels, and bring everything that you've learned with you, so that it's not just knowledge. Not that there's anything wrong with knowledge, but it becomes more. It becomes the way that you live your life. It becomes what your life is. Your life just is it. Like these days, for me, I don't have any lofty spiritual goals. I am human, and my humanity is my realization. Like that's where I am, and what I'm realizing about humanity is just becoming more and more profound every day. Like I had no idea that the depths of it, which are too deep to go into right now, but it extends out into my relationships in ways that enrich my life, in ways that I had never thought possible. I never thought I would be this person. And I'm so happy that I am. Even with my struggles, it's okay. And I'm so happy that I'm here and not trying to get to the top of the mountain. I'd much rather be in the village.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that word deepening. Is like you say, it's a deepening. That feels more true to me than there's like, oh, you suddenly get to enlightenment, you and then that's the end of it. I think there's an infinite deepening to this. That's how it seems in my experience, and from what you're saying, your experience is like, yeah, you can have the realization, and then you just deepen more and more into that infinitely. It's not like there's no end point, because really, even if you haven't got this experience, you can understand logically that infinity doesn't have an end point to it. This is infinity, so you are infinitely deepening into your understanding of yourself, and not just like an intellectual understanding, but like a deep felt understanding. Just like a fully not just like spiritual, but a somatic feeling, but just a feeling of being, and in every way deepening. And your body, there's side effects to this. I've noticed my body is less tense. It's not usually talked about, but my body's less tense. Like I start to realize why there were so many knots in my body all the time, why I felt so heavy all the time. You know, I'd had psychedelic experiences where I thought that was it. I'd experienced everything, and like, you know, there can't be anything more to know than that. I've realized everything was God at the beginning, middle, and end. Reality was already perfect and whole and complete. And it's like, okay, so what do I do now? I've come back to my human life, and I'm still experiencing heaviness. What the fuck? Why?
How do you handle your relationships now? Like,
yeah, exactly. So okay, I see. Now I'm just deepening into that understanding in every way, and it saturates, like you've said, it saturates your human life.
I feel like my body and my humanity is just like a cache of treasures. Like, the more awareness that I bring into my humanity, the more jewels I find. And some of them are so difficult to describe, but it's like unlocking like just knowledge, like treasure chests of knowledge held within the body that unravel the mysteries of life and the universe. Like, the universe starts to make more sense. My connectedness with the universe and with all life becomes more real and tangible. Like, I feel it, literally, like as flows of life force through my body. It's not some abstract thing, it's completely alive, and it's transforming my perception of myself and my place within our living cosmos in a way where I know that I belong, that I am a part of this vast entity that is my own self. It's making tangible all the things that are said about in non-duality, so that you know them.
What comes to mind when you say that is the drop in the ocean in the drop. You're realizing the microcosm is the macrocosm. Like, so it's your drop of water, Jack, the body, is realizing through these bits that what you're saying, you're unlocking it within the body. You're realizing the kind of mysteries of the universe, the high knowledge of the universe, because you are actually, it's fractal. Reality is fractal. The droplet is realizing itself. This particular approach you and I are talking about is not about dismissing the body in any way. In fact, if you go into the body, you see the whole universe.
Yeah. And spirit, like, all the realizations are right there. And that they're realizations that are embodied realizations. And all the non-dual teachings apply. And they apply in a way that doesn't exclude your life. It doesn't exclude who you are. It doesn't exclude the time that you got annoyed at your partner. It doesn't exclude, like, the fact that you're frustrated because you'd like a different job, or the fact that you celebrate because you've just landed in the perfect one. It's all there. It's all present there. And the gems of realization that are held within the body, sometimes they are guarded by your own darkness. So in the mythological sense, there's a battle that is waged that looks like going through your own personal turmoil and then bringing consciousness to it. Like in a computer game example, it's like, well, you got to defeat the boss to get the prize, and you realize that you were the boss. That's how you defeat them.
Yeah, I know. Oh my goodness.
You don't slay the
Yeah.
dragon, you realise
You know the
you
boss's
are
moves.
the dragon.
There's nice side effects to this, I found in my experience, and I don't want to say that it will be like, this will be exactly how it is for someone else. But Sat Chit Ananda is a true phrase for me, like being consciousness, bliss. Or bliss could even be translated as ecstasy for me, or just pure ecstatic, blissful energy. Reality, as far as I can see, is made of that. When I really feel into it, everything's made of that. Even the shame and the guilt is like kind of got that quality to it, and anger as well. Like it's got that quality when you really feel into it really sensitively. It's like, oh, I can see how that's made of that. Like when you feel into it and just are very sensitive with it. And this, through being with your emotions and your darkness in this way that we're talking about, has a nice side effect. And yes, this is a carrot. I'm giving a carrot here. More ecstasy is able to flow through your body with much more ease. That's my experience of it. I can't say this is universally true, but it's how I've experienced it, and I believe that's how you've experienced it as well. Is greater amounts of ecstasy are able to flow through my body. Obviously, I don't need to say why that's enjoyable. It's just like, I don't need to explain to someone why that's enjoyable or why that's something that might be nice to bring about. But the weird thing is, it's not like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm getting rid of these shitty dark feelings so I can experience the ecstasy. It's like, no, it's realizing the ecstasy inherent and is present throughout the dark feelings. Like it's that's already there. That's how you realize the ecstasy, and then the energy is free. It's free because it was, or you know, it's not. You've no longer put it in a box and trapped it and told it it's not belonging to the ecstatic flow of everything. You're reclaiming the ecstasy there, and that's the approach. It's not kind of like, I'm going to move this stuff out of the way and eventually there'll be a clean flow for the ecstasy to flow through. It's more like you realize the ecstasy in the midst of these really dark things that couldn't seem less like ecstasy, and you realize it there.
It's like less logical, isn't it? Like for me anyway, like I was saying earlier, I'm someone who just naturally passionately throws myself into things, and I have the same approach to spirituality and the evolution of darkness and light within me. And that means that just things will just come up. Like I'm not like, okay, today I am going to work through my darkness of this part and that's that done. It's like, no, it comes up because it got triggered by somebody and what they said, and then I know that I'm going into it, and then it's like, okay, like what gifts, like what will this become? Like who will I be after I truly meet this part of myself? And just like going into it. And I love the analogy you were giving there of like the ecstasy is held within the darkness already. It's just like how the flame is held within the wood before it's lit. Like the darkness is the fuel that becomes the ecstasy once it's ignited by the light of consciousness. Like when you got a magnifying glass and you like shine the light of the sun onto it.
It's all ultimately one whole, isn't it? It's one thing. This is non-duality after all. Non-duality isn't some like philosophy or some system. This is like, we're talking about non-duality right now. This is, everything is non-duality, and this is completely inclusive of it. And so the ecstasy, yes, it was already there as what's seemed like something other than ecstasy. It's already completely in there.